die, washed headlong from on board. Of friends of hope, of all bear his floating home forever left. No braver chief could Albion boast than he with whom he went, nor ever ship left Albion's coast. With warmer wishes sent, he loved them both, but both in vain, nor he beheld, nor her again. Not long beneath the whelming brine, expert to swim he lay, nor soon he felt his strength decline. Or courage die away, but waged with death a lasting strife, supported by despair of life. He shouted, nor his friends had failed to check the vessel's course, but so the furious blast prevailed, that pitiless perforce they left their outcast mate behind and scudded till before the wind. Some secure, yet they could afford, and such as storms allow, the cast, the coop, the floated cord, delayed not to bestow. But they flew, nor ship nor shore, whatever they gave, should visit more. Nor cruel as it seemed could he their haste himself condemn, aware that flight in such a sea alone could rescue them. Yet bitter felt it still to die, deserted and his friends so nigh. He long survives who lives an hour in ocean's self upheld, and so long with his absent power his destined repel, and ever as the minute flew entreated help or cried adieu. At length his transient respite passed, his comrades who before had heard his voice in every blast could catch the sound no more, for then by toil subdued he drank the stifling wave, then he sank.
No poet wept him, but the page of narrative sincere that tells his name, his worth, his age, is wet with Anson's tear, and tears by bards of hero shed, alike immortalize the dead. I therefore purpose not or dream, descanting on his fate, to give the melancholy theme a more enduring date. But misery still delights to trace its semblance in another case. No voice divine the storm allayed, no light propitious shone. When snatched from all effectual aid, we perished each alone. But I beneath the rougher sea, and whelmed in deeper gulfs than he.
Lines 1 through 6. In the Atlantic Ocean, under the night sky, the main character falls overboard of his floating home. Lines 7 through 12. Britain could not brag on any commanders greater than whom the main character was traveling with, and no other ship left Britain with a warmer wishes than the ship he was on. He loved both in vain, meaning his love was unrequired and did not amount to much to the eyes of the loved. He would never see either again. Lines 13 through 18. Despite the fact that he was an expert swimmer, he didn't take long in the engulfing salt water for him to tire and give up hope. He fought death with a lasting fight, encouraged by the fact that he did not want to die. Lines 9 through 24. He yelled for his friends, but they never turned back for him. The strong winds remained, and unfortunately, the inevitable occurred, and they left him behind. The ship kept sailing on as in the wind. Lines 25 through 30. They could have helped him, but he thinks they didn't due to the storm. They believed that he was a goner, so therefore they left him. Lines 31 through 36. Though it seems mean for them to leave him, he doesn't blame them for leaving him and saving themselves. It was better for them to get away than them all die. Yet he is still upset that he has been left behind.
Lines 37 through 42. He keeps himself alive and afloat for an hour, and as the minutes passed, his distasteful destiny came closer, and he was anxious for help and cried out goodbye. Lines 43 through 48. At last, he had a short period of relief, and his shipmates, who had been hearing his cries, no longer heard a sound. Then, as his efforts and labor softened, he took in the water and let himself sink. Lines 49 through 54. No poet wept for him, but the log book on the ship that told his name, rank, and age was wet with the tears of Captain Anson. The tears of the captain shed for him made him forever remembered. Lines 55 through 60. Shift to the poet speaking of himself. He believes there is no hope for him, much like the man lost in the sea. Both suffer despair and are engulfed in their misery. Lines 61 through 66. God didn't stop the literal or figurative storms in their lives. Both the poet and the sailor die alone, however, the poet feels his situation is worse.
William Cowper's poetry is known for its polluting ways and provides a transition for a more simple style. In this poem, The Castaway, he describes a sailor who has fallen overboard a ship from a storm. He writes about the feelings of the sailor throughout the poem as he is forced to watch the ship sail away, and as he makes the attempts to rescue himself from his awful fate. The poet gives off a very defeated and depressing tone. One of the sources believes that Cowper is speaking about himself and the way he felt at the time. Quote, "The effect of the long metaphor in keeping the poet's ego in the background is to illustrate indeed the poet is a insignificant thing, a tiny, isolated being beyond the help of his fellows and the concern of his God." According to the biography of William Cowper in the textbook, Cowper suffered madness, and the Castaway was actually an autobiography in which I believe he draws the darker picture of a mind sundered from its maker by distance and despair, in order to reflect his emotions of his own life at the time.
Throughout the poem, the main character's many emotions are expressed as he floats, awaiting his death. First, he is afraid and a little upset, yet he still has a little hope, much like all people do when they are first put into bad situations. As the time goes on, and still nothing is looking up, the character loses all hope and begins thinking of his friends and tries to comfort himself by thinking that although, yes, he may die, at least his friends will make it through. At this point, I believe that Cowper is trying to show that seeing the bright side in times of darkness is still an important thing to do. After laboring hard to try and stay alive, the character accepts that he has failed and will die, and the ocean swallows him up. Sometimes in life, people can get so wrapped up in their misery that they feel like it consumes them. I believe that the poem describes the distance Cowper felt from his maker, and that he finally accepted that part of his life had ended. The Castaway was the last poem that Cowper wrote before he died. Coincidence or not? It is said that William Cowper based this poem on George Anson's fleet, which had gone around the world in 1741 to 1744. Here is an excerpt from the story. "We conceived from the manner in which we swam that he might continue sensible for a considerable time longer of the honor attending his irretrievable situation." It is very similar to Mr. Cowper's poem. The poem was written in 1799. Cowper was a very depressed man at the time he wrote this poem. Cowper was very religiously unstable. Towards the end of his life, he started to believe that God had turned against him. The poem contributes very well to the way he believes in God. He feels like God has given up on him and given him the short end of the stick.
Much like the main character in The Castaway, Cowper first felt despair, then maybe felt that he wasn't worth God's love and didn't blame him for giving up on him, but was still sad. The last year of his life, Cowper most likely felt neglected, defeated, but accepted it.
Our primary source was our textbook, The Longman Anthology of British Literature, the 4th edition. From EBSCO, we got 3 sources, and we also found 2 reliable poetry websites to use as sources. I'm drowning. It's like immortality. Hold up.
6. How do I say that? To say these are the translations, or these are the literary analysis. William Cowper. Is that how you say his name?
Cowper?
Cowper? I always say Cowper.
Okay, just...
William
Copper.
Where do you go? William
Copper.
poetry is known for the preluding ways of William
Copper was a very religious... Throughout the poem, the emotions of the main character is expressed...